Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
Welcome to Defense News Weekly. I'm Andrea Scott. In a special episode this week, we take time to look back at the Military Times 2023 Service Members of the Year, honoring the most standout members of the military from each of the 5 branches. We highlight military acts of heroism, selflessness, and bravery. Held at the Ronald Reagan International Building in Washington, D.C., the 2023 gala saw luminaries from government and the military gather to commend top performers from the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, and Space Force. Candidates are nominated by peers and brought to the nation's capital for the annual event. And each year, we like to highlight their stories. Up first this year, 2023's Guardian of the Year, Captain Victoria Garcia, is a Mexican-American with a complicated job. She was tasked with establishing a space electromagnetic warfare hub in Europe following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a new feat for the fledgling Space Force. Long hours, long days, and complicated detailed planning went into the mission and fell heavily on Garcia's shoulders. Here's more of her story.
I chose to enlist because it was the American dream. I know that sounds cliche, but it was. I emigrated here from Mexico with my mom and my 2 sisters. For me, it was an opportunity to go see the world. My name is Victoria Garcia. I'm a captain in the United States Space Force. Space Force is the newest military branch charged with organizing and training and equipping our Guardians to head all over the world and support space global operations. Space Force defends against the threat to the space domain. It's very contested, and we protect and defend against the ability to maneuver that domain. We work with all the other branches very closely, specifically in a combat zone. If the Army or the Marines are headed out the door for a specific mission and they need to make sure that they have secure comms to speak to each other, or they need some type of GPS navigation to make sure they're headed to the right direction, those are space assets that they're relying on, and they need us. They need the Guardians to make sure those assets are there for them. All the planning to get those teams out the door is something I oversee. We talk to those crews on a consistent basis to make sure they have everything they need to execute the mission and support all those joint partners that they work with. My job is specifically focused on overseeing Space Delta III. Our mission area is the space electromagnetic warfare arena.
With tensions high on the ground between Russia and the U.S. and NATO, there's some concern that the conflict could one day spill over into space.
In about February of 2022. The orders we received were from the President of the United States. They were filtered down through the Secretary of Defense and given to us by the United States Space Command to establish the space electromagnetic warfare flight. It was the first in history that U.S. Spacecom was establishing and bedding down in a location we had never been before. We used that time to build all of our logistics plans. We were able to offload all of the equipment, transport that over to a hardened aircraft shelter, and then turn it into the Space Force's Operations Center. At that point, we started our Overwatch missions. We were able to posture our Guardians and airmen to watch over the electromagnetic spectrum and be called upon when needed to support a crisis in any part of that country. My team, they're the ones who exuded courage. They're the ones that persevered and worked so tirelessly just to create that flight there in Europe. That mission was successful because of my team's efforts. They showed that they can operate quickly. They showed that they could work tirelessly. I hope when people look at me, they see a picture of perseverance. They see a picture of someone who's overcome. I'm so happy. I'm living the American dream. There's no end in sight for me. I enjoy what I do. I'm motivated by the things that we support and the domain that we protect.
Navy search and rescue medic Anthony Anglikowski says there are no one-man rescue operations. But this hospital corpsman's second class sure took a strong swing at it after 2 hikers had an accident in Washington state. Trapped in an icy crevice and with nightfall closing in, their lives were in danger. But Anglikowski lowered himself to extract them. Here's the story in his own words.
A lot of what we do can be hard. You just learn to rely on your friends, rely on your crewmates, talk about things, and get through it and on to the next one. My name is Anthony Anglikowski. I'm a hospital corpsman 2nd class, United States Navy. I am a search and rescue corpsman. To me, being a corpsman means taking care of the people around you. Not only are you responsible for the well-being of patients who you may or may not know, any emergency that happens, but the well-being of also your shipmates, the people you work with. People are looking for you to help. People are relieved to see you. You get to make a substantial and objective impact on somebody's life. There's a whole hierarchy of how things get to us and how we end up getting activated. If the ground mountain rescue teams cannot do it, and pretty much if everybody else turns it down, it comes to us. When the altitude's too high, or the weather's too rough, or the mountains are too close, people call the Navy. So May 23rd, 2021, it was a Sunday. It was the 3rd day of our duty rotation. We were launched for 2 hikers who had fallen about 1,000 feet down a slope. Rumor had it that at least one, if not both, had ended up in a crevasse somewhere down the slope. This one sounded very critical. The initial impression for somebody falling into a crevasse is that chances are not good that this ends well. But that doesn't mean we don't go and give it our all and take our shot at doing what we can. We did some research on the area. The weather was not promising, but we figured we'd go out there and give it a shot and see what we could do. The ground that we touched down on was about a 45-degree slope of snow and ice. We ended up using ice axes and the litters we were carrying as anchors so that we could traverse about 50 yards across the slope to where the subjects were. They report that the second victim went down the hole. That's about 10 yards off to my side. It's about, I don't know, 2 feet by 2 feet, and there's a waterfall running through it from the snow melt. So it's a pretty grisly looking scene. If there was anything we could do about it, I had no intentions of leaving her on the mountain that night. The ground rescue guy was very, very cold from the waterfall. I swapped places with him and I got back in on the second rope. I was able to get myself under the ledge behind her and use my body to force her out over the ledge so that they could then pull her up. They got her to a ledge in a safe space and then came back and recovered me. Not every rescue has the exact outcome that you want it to have. Not everybody survives every injury, and not every situation allows you to get all the people that you want to get. But we do what we can. This wasn't a fantastic outcome to this mission, but we were able to pick up the other injured subject, get some good Samaritans off the mountain, and utilize the ground rescue team both in and out to make sure that we did everything we could. I hope that when I'm done here with this tour, people maintain a standard for medicine. I always encourage people to want more, to do better, to train harder, and I hope that that standard and that expectation exists long after I'm gone. I try to help wherever I can and whenever I can. It's the same thing I tell my son every day when I leave for work. Be good and do good. And I figure as long as I go out there and I continue trying to be good and trying to do good, I'm on the path that I want to be on.
When we come back, more stories of bravery and sacrifice from our 2023 Service Members of the Year. Don't go away. Welcome back. Lieutenant Chelsea Sheehy has a lot on her hands and under her responsibility. As the commander of a Coast Guard vessel, she's got the safety and well-being of both her crew and the public to think of at all times. When a boat capsized in her area in 2022, Sheehy had to spring into action, and her calm under pressure that day helped save lives of more than a dozen people. Here's more about the 2023 Coast Guardsman of the Year.
What we do in the Coast Guard directly impacts Homeland Security. And I know that each job that I've had, every watch I've stood, ships I've driven, that what we're doing is protecting our nation. And there is a deep sense of patriotism and pride in that. My name is Chelsea Sheehy. I'm a lieutenant in the U.S. Coast Guard, and I'm the commanding officer of Coast Guard cutter Charles Sexton. I grew up in North Brunswick, New Jersey. We were in a family that were boaters. We didn't grow up on the water. My brother went to the Coast Guard Academy while I was in high school. I can remember taking him to his first day, dropping him off for reporting in, and that's what garnered my interest. So I went for a freshman for a day and just having a feeling that this is where I belonged and this would be a good fit for me. The Coast Guard has instilled the traits of leadership. I get to be in command of ships, get to have leadership roles and opportunities that perhaps my grandmother never had, but I've been able to have. As commanding officer, I oversee entire safe navigation of the ship, all the missions on board that we conduct, and I'm responsible for everyone's safety. The Coast Guard has 11 statutory missions, but they're all centered around saving lives. We are, first and foremost, always a life-saving service. Back in the spring of 2022, we responded to a vessel that was unseaworthy, and it appeared to be a migrant vessel at sea. We noticed that the vessel was actually capsized and that they were holding onto it, sitting on top of the vessel that was capsized and sinking. They were waving their arms. They were in distress. They were visibly concerned and worried. They didn't have any food. They didn't have any water. They didn't have any flotation devices or safety equipment. And once we got alongside and we started taking them off the capsized vessel, there was moments of relief. And we rescued upwards of 15 people. And if we didn't see them waving their arms, if we weren't there, then within 24, 48 hours, a more dire situation would have resulted. And this is just one of over 60 cases that I've responded to in the last year. Another aspect of the Coast Guard is maritime law enforcement, fisheries enforcement, port security, and drug interdictions. One of the most challenging is drug interdictions. In March of 2022, while on a routine patrol, we detected a vessel moving at a high rate of speed in a known drug trafficking area. We launched our small boat. They ran about 40 knots to this vessel. In that moment, there was an adrenaline rush. There were tense moments too, just because you don't know what kind of case you're gonna run into. What we do at sea is inherently dangerous, and especially stopping a vessel with suspected drug traffickers on board, you don't know what you'll be faced with. We stopped the vessel, conducted a boarding, and determined that there were 609 kilograms of cocaine, which equates to about $15.5 million of drugs that was prevented from going to the United States. I'd like to serve until the Coast Guard no longer wants me to serve. I still feel really deep feelings of fulfillment. I'm proud of what we do, and I'm proud to be part of the Coast Guard. It's given me more than just a job. I received an education, training, some of my closest friends, and even my family, some of the people I love the most, I've gained from the Coast Guard. There are only a handful of female commanding officers of cutters in the Coast Guard, so it's important to me to lead by example.
In the chaos of the Kabul airport, as U.S. forces were extracting themselves and Afghan civilians in the final days of the war, threats were everywhere. In the midst of it, an armed plane was abandoned on the runway, required to keep American military flights landing and taking off, presenting a giant security and safety problem. Luckily, Marine Master Sergeant Kevin Hanschild was there to take action. Check out the story behind his award for Marine of the Year.
When I was about 7 years old, my mom and dad took me to the USS Lexington in Corpus Christi, Texas, which was the first time I met a United States Marine. And I was like, I want to be that guy. I knew that's what I wanted to do. What it means to be a United States Marine to me is really the traditions, the honor that we have as Marines. My name is Master Sergeant Kevin Hanschild. I'm a United States Marine Air Traffic Controller. One of the things I really love about being an air traffic controller is we get to work up in the tower and you get to look out 360-degree views some pretty amazing things depending on where you're at. Across the board, no matter the branch of service you're in, our job is to effectively provide safe, orderly, and expeditious flow of air traffic. You're constantly paying attention to making sure there's no obstructions in the runways, no vehicles, no aircraft. You always have to be ready. You always have to be trained. You always have to be prepared, which is something that we hold in high regard within the Marine Corps. On 15 August, we woke up normal morning. We got the call from our colonel. They had evacuated the tower. The Taliban was moving into the city. As soon as we got down there, it was chaos. There was aircraft everywhere, taking off, and just sheer panic. There was an Afghan Air Force Cessna that had aborted takeoff, and we watched them roll and just stopped right in the middle of the runway. Our initial thoughts were, okay, they know where we are, and that aircraft has rockets on it, so this is it. And then all of the pilots and aircrew get out of the aircraft and run back to the hangars. So that ceased all operations whenever you have an obstruction like that on the runway. We had aircraft stacked up in the pattern. C-17s were trying to land. We just realized we had to move the obstruction. We had to get it off the runway. So myself and Gunnery Sergeant Jose Mendez and two special forces, we jumped in the back of a pickup and we drove out there, made sure we checked everything around just to make sure there was no bombs, no munitions. As we started towing the aircraft off, the civilian controllers had notified me that they left all the radio equipment in the tower that they evacuated. Without the radio equipment, they would not be able to effectively communicate with any aircraft frequencies. And we were looking for an Afghan controller as well as that equipment. He was supposed to have that equipment in hand. Once we got there, there was anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 people around the airport.
The chaos in Afghanistan as thousands crowded onto the tarmac in a desperate attempt to get away from the Taliban.
Kind of navigated through finding this one Afghan controller with the equipment in hand. We got him in the truck with us, and we started to come back to coalition sides when our vehicle got struck. As soon as the round started impacting the truck, I immediately jumped on top of the Afghan that we had in there. He didn't have any body armor protection or anything like that, and I did. So I figured once the bullets started impacting the vehicle, if one got through, I'm more protected than he is. Once the machine gun fire kind of slowed down a little bit, the truck then proceeded just to drive past Abbey Gate. We cleared a few checkpoints and then finally, within about an hour, made it back to the north side of the airport. So I'm grateful that we were able to help a lot of those Afghan citizens evacuate to safety. That's the whole reason we were there. So it's very humbling to know that we were a part of something like that. I'm very proud. And it really is, it's due to the team that I had out there. To any Marines that come, in the future, make sure you know your job. Be successful at it. Never stop training because you never know. You always have to be ready at any time.
When we return, a look at more stories of bravery and service in our special episode. Stay with us. In the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, masses of U.S. forces were called upon to transit NATO allied countries near the conflict zone. How do you get a cavalry regiment and all their equipment deployed to a forward location in a matter of weeks? Our 2023 Soldier of the Year, Master Sergeant Justin Bolin, has a thing or two to say about it. Here's his story.
Good evening, and we're coming on the air at this hour with breaking news.
Vladimir Putin now rattling his nuclear saber.
Russia has the largest stockpile of nuclear warheads in the world.
There are Ukrainians wanting to stay and protect their homeland.
They are not going to go down without a fight.
50 left, 50 left.
I'm Justin Bolin. I'm a Master Sergeant in the United States Army. I currently work as the Operations Sergeant Major for the 2nd Cavalry Regiment and 2nd Squadron. What it means to me to serve is truly to kind of put your own selfish wants or your own personal needs aside and thinking of other people first. There's a sense of pride in that. So in my opinion, you're kind of a part of an elite group of American citizens who are willing to do whatever is necessary to keep their nation safe and secure. So currently my job as a 19 Zulu Senior Armor Sergeant is I oversee operations for multiple different organizations. I started off as a 19 Delta Cavalry Scout, which is reconnaissance and intelligence gathering for the Army. I was a part of a numerous amount of exercises, deploying soldiers all across the European continent in support of training missions or other type of exercises to help foreign national partners train for their upcoming missions or upcoming deployments to other countries. Being a scout has enabled me to kind of see things differently. By paying attention to detail and focusing on the smaller things that most people would miss allows me to help other soldiers in the same sense of allowing them to see projects they may have missed or mistakes they may have made or prevent them from making a mistake in the future. In February 24th of 2022, due to Russian aggression when they invaded Ukraine, the 2nd Cavalry Regiment was notified and requested to push forward to the eastern flank of multiple countries to help support our NATO alliance and additional countries who provided support and aid to the Ukrainian efforts. My responsibility was ensuring that our people got to the right place at the right time with the right things. I assisted in deploying the regiment in a very short time frame, matter of weeks, deploying over 86 people to one country and over 300 to 400 people in multiple different countries. To help aid the Ukrainians in sense of training is extremely important for me because we have a vast knowledge of tactics, techniques, procedures that could help increase their survivability and help increase their knowledge and allow them also to pass those lessons forward. The Ukrainian soldiers that we've trained have a wealth of knowledge. They are your farmer, they are your mechanic, they are your baker who are losing their home every single day or getting closer to losing their home. So they have a purpose. And to help support their purpose and expand their purpose was extremely meaningful to me personally. Every soldier who puts on a uniform is a human first, is a person first, is a mother, a father, a son, a brother, somebody else. They are people who are willing to fight for what they believe in, fight for what's right. For me, what's worth fighting for is a future. Whatever that future may be, we're only here for a short amount of time, so you fight for your future and make sure that you make the world a little bit better for the next person coming up.
And stick around when we return, a harrowing story from the last days in Afghanistan. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly and our 2023 Special Service Members of the Year episode. I'm Andrea Scott. A critical care air transport nurse is among one of the most highly challenging jobs in the Air Force. Sent aloft in a plane with a bare-bones team to care for injured and sick patients, they have to work in very difficult conditions to get people to safety. For Major Katie Lunning, the attack at the Kabul airport represented an incredibly tough mission. Learn about how she responded and why she's our Airman of the Year.
As a nurse, you can lead, you can teach. I try to tell people all the time just the message of being ready and understanding what your job is and being prepared for anything to change. My name is Major Katie Lunning, and I'm a critical care air transport registered nurse at the 133rd Air National Guard out of Minnesota. I'm part of the critical care air transport team, or CCAT as we call it. It's a 3-person specialized team of a doctor, RN, and RT, and we provide ICU level care to fly the most critically injured or ill to the next higher echelon of care. The Minneapolis VA is where I started, taking care of intensive care unit patients. That gave me the skills that I needed to be a CCAT nurse. There's been a lot of challenges over the years that I've been in the Guard, but definitely the most challenging that I've had was being sent to Afghanistan. On August 26th, I had just returned from a 20-hour mission where I had taken care of intensive care unit patients, and my phone rang, and it was my doc, and he was calling saying there's been an explosion at the airport in Kabul, and we need to go back right this second. We were under the assumption it was a suicide bomber. The crowds had scattered, and it was replaced by Taliban fighters. They were shooting rockets at the airplanes much more frequently at this time when we were trying to land. This was the first time I'd ever been in this severe of a situation. We had 17 Marines, aeromedical evacuation patients who had various injuries from broken limbs to burns. And then we had 5 critical care patients that our CCAT team were taking care of. Some of the hardest emotionally for me on that flight was the Marines. My patients who were on life support and on the ventilator, their buddies would actually help me with them. It was hard watching those Marines interact. They were there for each other. So the one was very much awake and the other one was on the ventilator. And the one that was awake would talk to his friend and keep him calm. He put a blanket on him at one point. He knew how much it hurt him to watch his friend be that injured. The other Marine had chest tubes coming out of everywhere. They had opened his chest at one point to save his life. He was awake, and I took his hand and I told him, I said, you know, we're flying to Germany, you're safe now. I'm gonna give you medicine to make you go to sleep. And he whispered, thank you, over his breathing tube. And it just floored me, like, you're thanking me? Look at what you just did for all of us. The way that the Marines were looking at us was with so much hope and trust, and I didn't want to fail them. So I wanted them to know that we were there caring for them and that they were in safe hands and we were going to get them to safety. My daughter was 8 years old at that time. She's my why. She's the reason that I do this. She's the reason that I serve. I want to be a good example to her. And part of it is that I know that everybody has a why. My teammates have a why. They have children that they want to go home to as well. And I knew that the Marines and service members and the people that we were flying out, they all have a why too. Everybody has somebody. My job is to get them back to their why. Every patient arrived alive and safe. The small part that we can play to getting them home for safety is everything. I hope the legacy I leave behind is awareness of what nurses can do. I'm proud to be an example of nursing and awareness for what the National Guard can do, that it's not just active duty, it's not reserves, but it's a whole team effort. I hope to keep serving as long as they'll have me. I still absolutely love it. I enjoy it. I feel like I'm not ready yet and that there's other challenges ahead of me, so I hope to stay around for a while longer.
And that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next week.